Hello again and welcome to another video for Inside Insurance. This video is on the new Regulatory Guide 271 that ASIC's issued in respect of IDR, or as we all know it, complaints. I'm going to break this video up into two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A will give you an overview and it'll be a bit of a short and sweet version for you so you can jump on into the portal and have a look at that and get a broad understanding of what the new regulatory guide's about. Part B will then go into more of the details for you, so I hope that sounds pretty cool. So let's get started. So as you would probably be aware, RG271 is designed to replace RG, or Regulatory Guide 165, and the new Regulatory Guide 271 comes into force on the 5th of October 2021, and ASIC is saying that it'll be claims after that date that the new Regulatory Guide applies. However, what you'll find as we go through this, that actually the new Regulatory Guide 271 simply expands upon RG165, and a lot of the stuff it talks about is just good common sense and a nice way to treat your customers. So my view is, as you implement 271, you can effectively then just stop complying with RG165 in that section for all claims, because by complying with 271 you'd automatically comply with 165. So that'll depend upon how you internally manage IDR and whatnot, but just be aware you don't need to run two parallel systems at the same time. The other thing about this particular regulatory guide is that you may not know that ASIC's regulatory guides, unlike APRA's prudential standards, ASIC's regulatory guides do not have the force of law. They are guidance. Now, you'd be pretty stupid not to kind of do what ASIC says, but nevertheless they don't have the force of law, except this particular guide does, because for AFSL holders, you'll be aware that their general obligations are in the Corporations Act, section 912 from memory, and one of those is to have an IDR. So a condition of the AFS license is to have IDR in place, and also to be a member of EDR, and for financial services that's AFCA. So therefore, and in the Corporations Act, it actually says that ASIC is empowered, if you like, to provide a regulatory guide, a standard requirements, etc. So that's this particular guide. So it has got the force of law. Indeed, ASIC, what I really like about this particular guide is that the parts of the Regulatory Guide 271 which are enforceable, ASIC actually puts that in the heading. So very, very helpful for us. So that's the other thing. So it has got the force of law, this particular regulatory guide. It's due to commence for complaints made after the 5th of October. So for complaints received by firms after the 5th of October, on or after 5th of October 2021. And the other point to make is what happens with the General Insurance Code. And for those who've got keen eyes will notice that the code is behind me. Now, under clause 12 of the code, it actually does say where there's conflict between the law and the code, the law always takes, the law prevails over the code. And there's a number of areas where that happens now. One is the time frame to resolve a complaint within IDR has been reduced from 45 days down to 30 days. In the code, it's still got 45 days. So now that will automatically, once this comes into place, there'll be 30 days. And the actual definition of complaint has been widened to pick up complaints that are made on financial firms or insurers' social media websites, etc. And again, that definition of complaint is wider than the definition that's currently in the code. So where there's conflict, the RG271 always prevails over the code. So just don't forget that. The other things I like, and I'm reading down because I've got the registry guide open in front of me. The other bits that I'd just like to call out to you around the new guide to include in the overview is what the registry guide covers off, and some of the new areas, and then part B will pick up the actual details as well. So, and this is at clause, so the way ASIC describes clauses in their registry guide, they say RG271 dot, and then the next number is pretty much the actual paragraph number of the particular registry guide. So at RG271.22, they go through from A to F what the guide covers off. Now, it covers off the actual definition of complaint. And as I said, now that definition, because the Australian New Zealand Standard has, so pretty much this particular definition of complaints now picks up the AS New Zealand standard, and it's widened to pick up complaints that are about a firm, so made on its social media. Picks up the minimum content requirements, so when you write to customers about the final outcome, or if you partially decline or fully reject the complaint, then the new IDR sets out, here's the content requirements of what you must put in writing. The maximum timeframes for IDR, as I said before, they've reduced now from 45 days down to 30 days. How ASIC expects internal IDR processes to interact with ABCAR, and that's about informing customers next steps, etc., etc. The requirements for identifying and escalating systemic issues, that's become a real important point for ASIC, and as you'd be aware, AFCA currently do that as well. So this is to give rise to systemic issues internally. And then don't forget, when you do identify an internal systemic issue, you need then to turn your mind to that, is this are we in breach of any of our financial services law obligations, and therefore is there a significant breach that needs to be reportable to ASIC, or are we in breach of the code, and again, is it a significant breach of the code that needs to be reported to the Code Governance Committee, and then you have to meet the 10-day time frames, etc., etc. And then and the final bit that ASIC have included in this regulatory guide is what they see as the requirements as far as IDR standards are concerned. And that's about having a publicly available policy plus internal processes and procedures. So very, very helpful the way it's all set out. And in part B of the video, that's what we'll be covering off. I'm just having a bit of a look now. One of the things that ASIC do say is that they don't necessarily, and they do, sorry, I should say don't, they don't necessarily, they don't. ASIC do not take a one-size-fits-all to the approach to the regulation. So when a firm does need, when an insurer, a AFS holder, etc., in the insurance industry needs to comply with their IDR obligations, then how they go about doing that will vary according to the nature, scale, and complexity of their business. So a small underwriting agency, for example, would not have the same IDR framework regime that a large insurer would. However, it would still have to pick up the components and those elements which ASIC have said within their guide are enforceable. And as I said, I've talked about the transition period before, that the actual standards, requirements and guidance in the regulatory guide apply to complaints received by financial firms on or after 5th of October 2021. However, given the customer-centric nature of a lot of these matters covered in the guide, it probably makes sense if you do them quicker, then do them quicker. And because RG 271 expands upon the current RG 165, then you don't have to run them side by side. So that's a very quick overview, just to kind of set it up for you. Hope you've enjoyed that, and if you've now got the time, I'll now see you in part B video. Thank you, and bye for now.